Hi, I'm Catherine Reid, and coming up next on the St. Paul Forum, I'm speaking with Marie Olofsdotter about her work as a teacher, painter, and poet. That's next on the St. Paul Forum. Welcome to the St. Paul Forum. I'm Catherine Reid, and joining me today is Marie Olofsdotter, a friend of mine from the art world. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so happy you decided to come.
Yeah.
So I know you in many different ways. I know you as an artist and an author and a storyteller, a painter. And we met originally through this beautiful book, Sophia and the Heartmender.
Yes.
I was introduced to this. Tell us a little bit about what brought you to write this beautiful little story.
Well, first of all, let's mention that I'm from Sweden, and I moved to the United States in the 80s, and I was going to fine art school, and I took a year off just to not isolate myself in the studio. I wasn't ready for that. I've always been interested in community work, and so I went to California for 1 year to go to clown school.
Oh, I forgot the clown school part.
Yeah, I'm taking you back to the beginning of my U.S. experience. And so after the year in clown school, I was invited to perform in Bemidji, and then traveled down to Minneapolis after that summer show was over, and ended up working with In the Heart of the Beast Theater for a year, and then have been an affiliate with them for a long time after that also. And so I was doing theater work, but then I felt like I wanted to get back to my fine arts roots, and just thought about, I've always liked narratives, obviously, because I'm interested in theater as well. So that brought the idea of writing and illustrating picture books up to the surface. And originally I thought I would focus just on the illustrations. So I started writing pieces that I would then illustrate to create work samples. But so that became the first book that was published, Sophia and the Heartmender. So it ended up being a story that I wrote and illustrated, and sold very quickly, which is unusual. And it was originally published by Free Spirit Publishing, which is a local publisher.
And is Free Spirit still here?
Free Spirit is still here,
yeah.
but then my book is now carried by Holy Cow Press, which is a fantastic press in Duluth.
And that's the one in Duluth, yeah.
And the book is available.
And the book is still available. Yeah. And what I wanted to do, you know, I've forgotten to, I love it that you connect these dots of the journey, because I think part of why I've always loved your work is that it does have the puppet quality to it. It does feel to me like while you work two-dimensionally and you work in narrative and poetry, that your stories do feel like they come off the page to me. So in my experience of this book, Sophia and the Heartmender, touched my heart, helped me heal a wound in my creative spirit. And that's how I think of you, is that a lot of your work seems to me to, whether you know you're setting about in that way or not, that's what the work seems to be able to do. Can you talk a little bit about what the inspiration is?
That is just amazing and beautiful feedback. And my work comes from a very deep place, even when it's lighthearted.
Yes.
And whether I like it or not.
Well, and your work is both lighthearted,
yeah.
and I mean...
Well, I'm a clown,
yeah.
so... Yeah. But I do feel like there's a part of me that has her own agenda, and then I sort of follow. So it's a deep process, which I think is true for many artists and creative people, that we work with a multidimensional awareness. Because we bring in stories and we look at things and we look for whatever it is, and then we express it and translate it. So it is a deep process.
And so in the clown experience, did you think of children? Did you think of adults? What was it you were wanting to connect to, both?
I think that I was not thinking so much about audience, actually, but more about my own creative expression. And I've always had two aspects to my personality, one that is very deep and introverted, and one that's extroverted and silly and clownesque. And that showed up even in grade school. We would have fun hour every Friday. I don't know if that's done in U.S. And I had a
Fun hour?
Yeah,
I
it was
don't think
it
the
was called-
kids know.
Not anymore. Well, we get to do whatever we want for an hour. And so it was routine for many years that me and a friend that I had would perform these little clown skits. So that was with me in grade school and followed me. And so, like I mentioned, when I was in art school, focusing in on sculpture actually after working in many disciplines, I wanted to take a year off because I wasn't ready for that solitary life. And I also was very shy, in spite of the clown performing part. And I thought it would be excellent training for me to go on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always liked theatrical clowning in the tradition of commedia dell'arte, that type of clowning.
Mm-hmm. Say that again.
Commedia dell'arte, it's a theater
Okay.
style from Italy that had inspired
Yes.
my teacher and also the teachers in California. So I followed that tradition of theatrical clowning. And I wanted to learn to be on the stage and to improvise. So what I say, and in fact said today, is everything I need to know I learned in clown school. Because you learn to improvise on your feet. Mm-hmm. It's a good tool to have in life.
And it's interactive. You have to be responsive to the audience.
Totally.
And,
if you're an island on stage, no one cares.
yeah.
And so which brings us to my work in the community, which I still love, communal work. As a teaching artist, which I do extensively, that's invaluable as a tool to connect with people.
Well, one of the things I've loved about the relationship I've had with you is in part that there are your regular posts on Facebook where you introduce us to all of the ways in which you work, really. Mm-hmm. You listen very closely to what's around you. You prepare for your interactions in the community, and then you are really working with a lot of children. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what, I find your commentary about that just very respectful. I love the respect you bring to your children. Tell us a little bit about your teaching and what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, thank you again for that feedback. I think that what I love is to be sort of a muse for the creative spirit. I think that's so important because, and that's not only for art. Mm-hmm. I mean, creativity touches all areas. Mm-hmm. So if you can fuel that and if you can teach people how to nurture that, that really helps you be a successful human being, and it teaches you to express yourself. And it's relaxing too, and it's fun, of course, going back to fun. So with my work with children, and now what we're seeing in the schools, unfortunately there's more and more testing and values put on that, which some is valuable, but we don't want to move away from just expressing ourselves through the arts for its own incredible potential to nurture us. And so in my work, I try to actually put the two together and work with curricula. Writing in particular, one of my favorite forms to teach is poetry. Love, love, love to work with all ages, actually, which I've taught poetry to kindergartners up through senior citizens, and for people to access their deeper selves and their own creativity. Mm-hmm. And in a school, of course, it is fanning the flame of the love of writing, which is also an amazing tool.
So sometimes when I read what you say about your students, and you often share a little bit of a clip of something they've written or said to you, I just get the sense that there's a starvation almost for the kind of teaching that you do with them. Can you kind of set
Maybe
this?
the way I would mirror them, because what I've learned with people is that they will meet you where you live. And so I go in and I assume that they're all creative geniuses. That's just how I come through the door. That's what I see. And to me, they're beautiful, and creatively speaking. And so I think that, you know, having someone do that for you, then they do meet you there. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well,
but this is something I was going to mention, is that someone did this for me early on when I was a little person. And it role modeled how that can be done.
So was this in Sweden?
And I came from a very creative family, but a busy family. So I had neighbors upstairs that my mom was working, and I would go up and hang out with them when I was just itty-bitty, little. As soon as I could walk, I'd be up there. And it was a beautiful couple with their son was already grown up and moved out. And the husband was a mason, and the wife was a housewife. And she would turn on the kitchen light, and she would say, "This is the sun, and it's shining just for you." And I would draw.
Oh my.
And then she would take my drawings and she embroidered them into pillows. And when I would
Wow.
come up, here would be these embroidered pillows of my art. And then the husband would come home and we would tell stories. We would sit on the bed and we would tell stories. He would start a story and I would build on it and he would build on it. And they both loved children. So it was that nurturing place, like a little hearth of creativity and love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and my own family was super creative, both my dad and my mom and my grandpa and, you know, others in the family. But so, and I think often about that, how they laid the groundwork for this work that I do. And then in stark contrast, when I began school, I ran into the opposite, a teacher who simply did not see me at all.
And that's kind of what's in Sophia.
Yeah, that aspect of it.
The teacher
Yeah.
whom I met in my life too, that's what touched me so deeply, was I could feel, so this teacher you encountered in school didn't welcome that
Not at all.
creativity.
No, and so here was this little girl with my friend, these little sparks. We still got to do our funny hour, but when it came to do a play, I didn't get to be part of it. It was heartbreaking. I get to do, and this is very symbolic, I got to do one little thing. I got to hold up a letter, and it was the letter O, which is a 0, nobody. So it was, you know, those things, but now if you think about it in a different way, in some ways she did many, many a favor because I broke through that. And I go in now, and when I work with children, I'll make sure I see absolutely everyone. And if I see someone who's not with me in the creative process, I will attend to them if they're interested, you know.
Yeah. So I'm curious, did you grow up speaking English as well in Sweden? Were you only speaking Swedish, or were you
Swedish only.
Swedish only? So when did you learn your English?
I studied, in Sweden we study English in grade school. So I had studied it, but not to the point where I was fluent. But when I decided to go to clown school, I had 2 choices that I was looking at, 3 actually, Spain, France, and then the US. And out of the 3 languages, I didn't speak Spanish at all, even though I love that culture and this language. French a little bit, and English just enough to get by. So that's how I came here.
I came here and started really working with it.
Working with it, yeah.
If you're just joining us, I'm speaking with Marie Olofsdotter about her work as a poet, an artist, and an author. So you took this language skill and you've expanded that, but you once you got to Minnesota, I think it's so interesting. One of the reasons we wanted to get together is this year you have been recognized as the official artist for the Minnesota State Fair, and while the fair is now over, we've got your beautiful work here. Tell us a little bit about what prompted you to want to do this illustration for the Minnesota State Fair.
Well, it used to be that an artist was commissioned, but then 3 years ago it was announced for the first time as a competition.
Oh, okay, I didn't
But
know.
before that, I had seen a big poster. It was Mary Grand Prix. She did it one year. And I looked and I thought, oh boy, I want to do that. But at that point, it wasn't a competition. But the minute it was announced, I applied and applied again. And the third one, I got it.
So a little message of persistence.
Yeah, absolutely. And as an artist, and everyone knows this, that you're sending your things out, feels like a black hole. But you have to just be persistent. And so, and this, I would have to say, for an illustrator, for me anyway, it is the absolute most amazing opportunity to illustrate something because it's for the whole state. It's for absolutely everyone, for a very broad audience. So I loved, it's also a challenge. And then looking at what had been done before in the color range and shapes and, sort of the essence of what the fair was looking for. But I love that kind of thing. Another element that was asked for this time was collaboration. And of course, I do that all the time in schools and with other artists. So those were...
and so how did you collaborate?
So, well, first I will say that I also had to... I'm going to bring this, hold this up.
Yeah, we'll hold it up, because it's so lovely. She's just the most amazing spiritual character here.
We named her Serafina.
Serafina, okay.
So in designing the poster, because you had to submit a sketch way back a year ago about exactly. And I looked at all the, like I mentioned, all the other fair art, state fair art, and then I went further and I started looking at vintage posters from all over the US. And I noticed that a lot of them had a woman quite prominent, holding grains, or some of them were quite racy, just loose Grecian drape, But so that inspired me, and I also wanted to do have the theme be the land, the agriculture, and sort of the roots of what the fair is about, the root of it, and so that was the idea. So that's Serafina here, and the land in the background. Also thinking about all the work that I do in rural Minnesota. Bringing that in. And of course the river, which I love. So that's what inspired the imagery. And then you were asking what the collaboration was. And so the team told me, now teach us to collaborate. So that was wonderful. And I said, well, this part here is the fair scene, and I wanted them to decide what elements of the fair we should have there. So we did that in a collaborative session with black and white printouts and cutting and taping and things like that. And then when it was time to bring in the colors, I brought something called Color Aid. They're little cards of color, and we collaborated on that too.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and all through the process, which you can do now with the internet and digitally, I would take pictures, send it in, and get feedback if I had an idea. And we would do some revisions all along. So it was just really luscious.
Yeah.
And it's fun to think about it now that the actual final art was delivered in March during a snowstorm, a blizzard. So that's the
and then you got to be a celebrity at the fair a little bit and see your work there. I want to point out. Why don't you hold up the mug too? We can
she's going to stand
see
here.
if it'll. Yeah, don't worry about it.
I'm not going to worry about it. Yeah. So then I didn't know actually that there was going to be merchandise until someone called me and said, I got a mug with your art. Holy smokes. So then I went and looked, and there are cups, and they are available online on the State Fair site.
Great.
There are glasses too.
Yes.
And at the actual fair, there were other merchandise, water bottles and little...
fun other things, but there is at least, and we'll put that up online so that people can order. So would you say that, so obviously the competition will be coming up again. Someone can start thinking about it. Do you know what the schedule is for that process, or how they find out?
If it hasn't been announced, it should be announced soon.
So someone else can be thinking about that.
Yes.
And of course, the fine art at the fair in general is such a fun part of, so many artists compete to be included in the show.
It's very, very, very competitive.
Super competitive,
quality
and just
show.
a wonderful show. So that's another way in which people can participate. Yes. And so I wonder if you would treat us with one of your poems and share one. And as we get ready for that, I wonder if you could talk just a little bit further about what you think is important about this nurturing of the creative spirit in our children. How do you see, is this an ongoing mission for you, do you think?
I don't think it's a mission. I think it's who I am.
Yeah.
I just think it's who I am. And if I'm off that, I'm not with myself. So it's like that. It's like breathing to me. I will mention also that nature, it's a huge inspiration for me.
Yeah.
That is, I live right by the Mississippi River. I can look out my window and see a huge park, immediate access to nature. So that's another, and that's shown in that.
Yeah, it's very clear in the painting that you did. And I'm thinking about, so when you're you're commissioned by, if people were interested in getting to know you as a teacher and get you involved. You've worked, I assume, with some places like Compass, possibly.
I'm a Compass roster artist.
You are a Compass.
I'm also listed through the State Arts Board. I do quite a bit of work through the Loft.
So you teach some classes at the Loft.
Yeah. Fairy tale writing.
I was going to say, are you still doing the fairy tale writing?
Yeah.
And what has, that's something we've talked about before. What have you found?
Oh yeah, we have talked about that.
It sounds like that's been pretty fruitful. Have those been mostly with adults?
No, this summer, 9 to 11-year-olds.
Okay.
And now I'm going out to do some writing work with kids in rural Minnesota, Lucky Pearl area. I'm going to do fairy tale writing. That's out by Madison.
Okay.
Yeah, fairy tale writing with kids, where they create original stories.
And and you give them a sense of the structure of the fairy tale.
Very strong structure with lots of space for personal creativity.
And why is it that fairy tales interest you so much?
I guess that just the mystic quality of it, the dreamlike quality, the magic interests me.
The idea that something can transform through the magical process.
How it tickles the imagination.
And so the boundaries are broken down a little bit, and people
also that fairy tales happen in the space of no time. Gives you so much freedom to play.
Yeah, no time. I like that idea.
Yeah, I mean, it is. You know, the classic fairy tale, once upon a time,
Yeah,
or in the times when,
in the times when.
or
yeah.
yesterday, you know, or many years ago, or a long time ago, just yesterday, that kind of thing. So we don't say when, because we are not talking about that. We're talking about another realm of magic.
Well, I know you focus on children. I just can't help but think that fairy tales would be an awfully good way for adults to think through, to break through some of their limitations of thinking about what is possible, whether they're doing strategic planning
Yes.
and I just think that it's a very, and since you're so interested in both community and collaboration, I'm just wondering, you know, what could that do for a planning process, if you will, or a city's imagination about what it wants to create?
Yeah, I think it could free people up. You know, it's playful too. Again, going back to playful. And I will mention, I've taught that workshop to teachers also, and with great results, because then we forget not only time, but our own age, you know.
Very useful.
Yeah, and you can find little maps to your own inner magic through it.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd love for you to read one of the poems, and maybe the one about the experience with the students, the teaching, if you would.
Let's see.
Set the...
I have one that talks about my neighbor.
Oh,
The neighbor couple. Is that the one you're thinking
Sure.
about?
Why don't we do that?
It's called Tools. And these are prose poems. The girl runs barefoot in a meadow full of globe flowers and forget-me-nots. Her upstairs neighbor parks an old bike with a kid's seat by a birch tree. They've come to pick lingonberries. The neighbor's husband is a mason. He and the girl make up stories together, one line at a time. There's a blue sofa in the living room. It has 4 embroidered pillows, portraits of women with big eyes and hoop earrings, faces the girl drew. When she draws, the lamp over the kitchen table is always lit, the sun shining just for you, the neighbor says. Because of this, and much later, the girl's palette is always rich in yellows, blues, greens, and reds. In every story she writes, there is a mason helping lay the foundation. Every ray of sunlight is food for the heart. Every piece of art, a place to rest.
Well, thank you for doing the poem to go with the. That's wonderful. I'm sure they must have loved that you recorded that. I'm curious. Have you ever had one of your students find you later? You know, some years later. Have you followed any of your students' paths or stories?
I haven't followed, but I have sometimes heard back from students, and then sometimes, of course, I make friends with teachers, well, a lot of the time. And then some of those teachers would then have kids in school, and so I get to meet them later, or they'll come in and help in the classroom, and it's just really fun.
So do you have any idea, I'm just wondering kind of how you have a sense of, you know, I'm giving you a little feedback about my experience with you, but I'm just curious if you get much information about how this may have made a difference. I think of these neighbors and how they've made such a difference
how I
for
carried
you.
with me.
And
Yeah.
I mean, everyone can speak of a teacher, I hope, I pray,
Yeah.
that every person
Yeah.
can at least refer to one teacher who made a difference for
Yeah.
them. And I'm just curious if you've gotten to hear any of that circle for yourself.
With this book, Sophia and the Heartmender, there's been amazing feedback, similar to yours.
The way it touches people.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm sure that there'll be a day when you have a few of your students. So as you're thinking about what's next, you had this incredible year with the fair. And when you think about what's coming up next, I realize you're excited about this next teaching engagement, but what is your maybe a little bit longer term hope for the work that you're doing?
Pretty much doing what I'm doing now, with mixing up my community work, which is teaching, with my own children's book writing and illustrating, other collaborative projects, and my poetry. So it's basically the same.
Yeah.
Doing the same, just keep expressing the same thing.
What books are on the radar right now for you?
Right now, I have 2 manuscripts that I'm trying to decide whether I should illustrate myself or just send out.
And they're children's books, again? Anything you can tell us about their themes?
One is a story about a magical blanket. It's a story about friendship, and so I'm still revising that a little bit. And another one is a book for kids about poetry with some poems in it.
And do you, people who work with writers and painters, do you have a certain schedule in your life? You know, people are always curious, how do you get that done? How do you get a book done. Is there a regular time of day that you try to work on your work? Is there a structure to your process?
It used to be a certain structure. I used to be creating in the fall and teaching in the spring, but that's all topsy-turvy now. So I don't have a set schedule, but I do keep blocks of time that I can work, because it takes me a long time to get into my own work. And then this summer, too, I've spent the whole summer picking up a new tool, which I love, and that's working in Photoshop. So, and that was through a grant through the State Arts Board. So I want to mention that. And put that,
so that State
through the
Arts Board
legacy
funding has
yes,
been, and this is legacy funding.
yeah,
which
big
has been,
thank you to the State Arts Board and all the citizens of Minnesota for that.
What do you hope to do with that
That
tool?
I will integrate into my illustration practice. So that's really the next step.
Oh, that sounds exciting.
It's very exciting. Love it.
And you don't feel a restriction that even though you work with your hands, this technical tool has been valuable.
Yeah, love it.
Oh,
love
good.
it. Digital collage and putting in elements of a painting mixed with photos. Fabulous.
Well, we'll make sure that people are able to find your books, your poster, some of your paintings by getting to your website. That's all we have time for. Come join us again next week on the St. Paul Forum.
Thank you.